Do not spend another nickel until you watch this. Because sitting in coin jars and forgotten rolls and dusty inherited collections across America right now are three specific buffalo nickels that collectors are hunting with serious money in hand. The 1930 no mint mark, the 1936 S, and the 1936 D. Worn flat, date barely visible, surface black with decades of oxidation. And worth amounts that will make you go through every nickel you own tonight with a loupe and a light. Stay here because the coin at the end of this list carries a variety so rare and so specifically documented that confirmed examples have changed hands at prices most people associate with jewelry, not pocket change. Before the first coin, understand what you are actually holding when you pick up a buffalo nickel. This is not just an old 5-cent piece. This is one of the most celebrated coin designs in the entire history of American coinage. Sculptor James Earl Fraser created it in 1913. A Native American portrait on the front built from three real individuals who sat as models for Fraser in his studio, combined into a single composite portrait that captured something true and powerful about a civilization that had been pushed to the edge of erasure by the forces of westward expansion. On the back, an American bison, modeled after Black Diamond, a real buffalo who lived at the Central Park Zoo in New York City at the time Fraser was commissioned for the design. The image was raw and honest, and unlike anything the United States Mint had ever placed on a circulating coin before. It ran from 1913 through 1938. 25 years of production across the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. And scattered across those 25 years inside the enormous pressure of producing hundreds of millions of nickels every single year are errors and varieties on specific dates that transform worn, barely readable coins into collector pieces worth serious money. Three of the most important are in this video right now. The 1930 no mint mark buffalo nickel. Philadelphia Mint. 1930. This coin arrives at a moment in American history that gives it a weight far beyond its metal content. 1930 was the first full year of the Great Depression. The stock market had collapsed the previous October, wiping out fortunes overnight and triggering a cascade of bank failures and factory closures that spread across the country with terrifying speed. Families who had been comfortable 6 months earlier were standing in bread lines. Men who had held steady jobs for decades were selling apples on street corners. The entire economic structure of the country was buckling under a pressure it had never experienced before. And inside the Philadelphia Mint, coin production was being scaled back dramatically as the demand for coinage collapsed alongside the economy. Fewer coins being made meant fewer dies being used. And fewer dies meant that individual dies ran longer before being retired because replacing a die costs time and resources, and in 1930 the mint was conserving both with a desperation that matched the desperation of the country outside its walls. That extended die life, those dies running past the point where they should have been pulled, is the direct cause of the varieties that make the 1930 no mint mark buffalo nickel so valuable to serious collectors today. The 1930 Philadelphia double die Obverse is the variety that serious collectors have been documenting and trading since the 1960s. The doubling appears on the Native American portrait side of the coin, specifically on the word Liberty arcing above the portrait and on the date 1930 at the bottom of the obverse. On confirmed examples, Liberty shows a secondary impression beside the primary lettering, each letter carrying a ghost outline raised above the coin field, offset from the primary letters, pressed there permanently when the working die was manufactured with a misaligned hub strike during the die preparation process. The date 1930 shows the same secondary impression most clearly on the 9 and the 3, the two digits most strongly affected by the specific angle of the hub misalignment on this variety. In heavily circulated condition, and 1930 buffalo nickels are almost always found in heavily circulated condition because Depression-era coins were used hard by people who had very little and could afford to be careful with nothing. The doubling is buried completely under decades of friction and oxidation. The coin looks flat. It looks worn out. It looks like something you would drop in a tip jar without a thought. But under a 10-power loupe with light held at a raking angle to the surface, the secondary impressions emerge on confirmed examples with complete clarity. Raised, defined, unmistakable to anyone who has learned to recognize hub doubling on a coin that has been circulating since the darkest economic period in modern American history. A confirmed 1930 no-mint mark double-die obverse buffalo nickel in circulated condition has sold at verified numismatic auctions for between $200 and $500. In better circulated grades where the date is still clearly readable, the number moves past $700. For a 5-cent coin struck in 1930 and spent by someone who needed every cent they could find. The 1930 no-mint mark carries a second variety on the reverse that adds independent premium value on top of the double-die premium. The American bison on the back of the coin, one of the most powerful animal images ever placed on American currency. The animal that once defined the Great Plains in numbers too large to count before being hunted to near extinction, shows a die crack on certain production examples from 1930. The crack runs from the rim of the coin through the bison's hindquarters and into the ground line beneath the animal's feet. That raised line crossing the back of the most iconic animal in American numismatic history is permanent mint evidence. It was pressed into every coin that die touched after the fracture developed, and it stayed there through every strike that followed. In circulated condition, the 1930 reverse die crack variety sells for $40 to $120 to specialists who are building documented sets of buffalo nickel die states from the Depression-era production years when extended die runs made crack varieties more common than they would have been under normal production schedules. The 1936 Buffalo Nickel. San Francisco Mint. 1936. By 1936, the American economy was beginning its long, painful climb out of the Depression. Roosevelt's New Deal programs had stabilized the banking system and put people back to work on federal projects across the country. The San Francisco Mint was producing nickels again at meaningful volume, and the 1936 is a coin that carries two completely separate varieties that together make it one of the most interesting buffalo nickels in the entire 25-year series. The first variety is the 1936 double die obverse. The doubling is most clearly visible on the date 1936 at the bottom of the obverse and on the word Liberty above the portrait. The 3 and the 6 in the date carry secondary impressions that under a 10-power loop are clearly offset from the primary digits. Raised, defined, the permanent physical record of a misaligned hub strike during die manufacture that transferred its doubled impression to every coin that die ever produced. Liberty shows the same offset secondary impression most strongly on the E and the R, the two letters most clearly affected by the specific misalignment angle of this particular San Francisco die. Confirmed 1936 double die obverse buffalo nickels in circulated condition trade between $150 and $400. The San Francisco Mint produced fewer nickels than Philadelphia or Denver in most years of the Buffalo nickel era, which means the overall surviving population of 1936 coins is smaller than comparable dates from the other facilities, and the population of confirmed error varieties within that already smaller mintage is smaller still. The second variety on the 1936 is the one that has driven collectors to spend serious money on coins that most people would drop in a vending machine without looking twice. The 1936 3.5 legs variety. The American bison on the buffalo nickel reverse has 4 legs. On every normal example, all 4 legs are clearly defined from the body of the animal down to the ground line beneath the bison's feet. But on the 3.5 legs variety, the front right leg of the bison appears to end halfway down its length. The lower half of that leg simply disappears into the field of the coin as if it was never struck at all. This happened because the die used to produce these coins had been over-polished by mint workers who were trying to remove a clash mark from the die surface. A clash mark being the ghostly impression left on a die when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a coin blank between them. The polishing removed the clash mark, but it also removed too much metal from the die face in the process, and the lower portion of the bison's front right leg disappeared from the die permanently. Every coin that die struck afterward shows a bison standing on 3.5 legs. The 1936 3.5 legs variety in circulated condition trades between $300 and $800 depending on how clearly the partial leg is visible through the surface wear. In better circulated grades with the variety clearly defined, confirmed examples have crossed $1,000 at numismatic auctions. For a nickel. For a 5-cent piece that someone in San Francisco spent on a trolley fare in 1936, without ever noticing that the buffalo on the back was missing half a leg. The 1936 D Buffalo Nickel. Denver Mint. 1936. The Denver production of 1936 is where one of the most consistently valuable buffalo nickel varieties was created and shipped into circulation without the mint ever making a public acknowledgement of what had happened. The 1936 D3.5 legs variety follows the same production origin as the San Francisco version. Over-polished dies removing the lower portion of the Bison's front right leg, but the Denver examples show a slightly different presentation of the partial leg because the die polishing at the Denver facility that year affected a different portion of the leg shaft than the San Francisco polishing did. On Denver examples, the leg appears to taper and fade rather than cut off with the relative sharpness seen on the San Francisco version, giving the Denver variety a visual character that specialists can distinguish from the San Francisco examples under careful magnification. Confirmed 1936. D3.5 legs buffalo nickels in circulated condition have sold for between $250 and $700. In better circulated grades where the partial leg and the surrounding design are still clearly defined, the number moves past $900. The 1936 D also carries a repunched mint mark variety that adds value completely independent of the 3.5 legs premium. The D mint mark below the denomination on the reverse of the 1936 D shows a secondary D impression at a slight offset from the primary mark on certain production dies, the permanent record of a hand-punched mint mark that did not land in exactly the same position on both applications to the working die. Because mint marks on buffalo nickels were punched into each working die individually by hand during this entire era, repunching was a constant possibility on every die produced at every facility. Confirmed 1936. D repunched mint mark examples in circulated condition sell for $50 to $150 to variety specialists who are building comprehensive documented sets of Denver buffalo nickel die states from the 1930s production years. 3 examination principles for every buffalo nickel you own starting tonight. Never clean them under any circumstances. The dark worn surface of a heavily circulated buffalo nickel is not hiding the coin's value. It is protecting whatever variety sits underneath it. Any cleaning process introduces microscopic abrasion that professional graders at PCGS and NGC identify immediately and classify as environmental damage. A cleaned buffalo nickel loses its collector premium permanently and irrecoverably. The original surface stays exactly as the decades left it. Use a 10-power loop and a single strong light held at a raking angle to the coin surface. Tilt the coin slowly in small increments while looking through the loop. On the obverse, look for secondary impressions on the date digits and on the letters of liberty. On the reverse, look specifically at the Bison's front right leg. If that leg appears to end before reaching the ground line, if the lower portion of the leg seems to fade or disappear into the field of the coin, you may be holding a 3.5 legs variety, and that single observation alone is worth getting the coin into the hands of a certified numismatist immediately. Check every mint mark under magnification for secondary impressions showing more than one punch application. Any observation that does not belong on a normal coin stops everything. The coin goes into a protective holder. Nothing else touches it until authentication. The 1930 no mint mark, the 1936 S, and the 1936 D are not the famous buffalo nickels in every beginner's price guide. They are not the dates that every new collector memorizes on the first day of the hobby. And that invisibility is the only reason confirmed error examples of all 3 are still being found in inherited collections and old nickel rolls and forgotten tins right now in 2025. Serious collectors are paying $300,000 and $701,000 for coins that the previous owner kept in a cigar box for 50 years without ever once looking at the Bison's legs under magnification. Go find every buffalo nickel you own tonight. Check the date. Check Liberty. Check the legs of the Bison. And do not spend a single one until you know with complete certainty exactly what you are holding in your hand.